Before I start with the bios, how long have we all known each other? I've been here for 11 years, and I've known Denyse probably since 2009 to some degree.
Right.
Richard.
I think I met you at the same time, Terry, because you scheduled a studio visit in my space.
Richard and I met, when did you?
Oh, well, 02.
02.
So,
Wow. So it's not even that much longer. So we came to Bridgeport in 2005, Chris and I, and we pretty much met the two of you right away, right? Because Chris Roz took us by.
and I met you, Emily, I think more like 2013 or 12 or something for real. I might have like bumped into you, but we did that bookbinding project.
Right. Although it's true we didn't meet until then, but we talked on the phone because weren't you putting together the show for Denyse at UB, at the UB Gallery?
Yeah.
So we talked on the phone about that. So like I was aware that you were here.
I had invaded
I had an
Connecticut.
awareness, and I had that was like really early on when I was at UB. Like it was like, so that was, if you were here in fall 2009, that was like that was my first year at UB.
Okay. And how long have the three of you been in the American Fabric Building? Since this is Bridgeport Art Trail.
2006.
I think we all have been there since, because we came. Emily, were you at Remington too?
No, I was supposed to move in there, but then it closed right when I was supposed to move. So I went up to Shelton first. So I think you've been there since 2005. And I came a year later after the Star Pin Factory was supposed to become condos.
And I took on my own space in the American Fabrics Building. I'm looking for pictures now, but I want to say 2008.
Okay, so a couple of years after.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I have for Richard, if I leave any pivotal important things out, let me know. That you were raised in San Diego, California, and you have an MFA in textile design from RISD. You live in Bridgeport. You've taught at Pratt, RISD, and I didn't see this in your bio, but you taught at FIT as well, right?
No.
Okay, just Pratt and RISD. Did you go to FIT or do workshops there or something?
No.
No. Okay, I just made that up.
But that's the number one mistake. After people calling me Robert instead of Richard, they all think I was at FIT. So
I'm just a conformist.
Terry, would you put more college in there? Because that's the other school where I was full-time.
Oh, Moore College. Okay. Yeah, so Moore College.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just going off of notes I saw on, and where's Moore College located?
Philadelphia.
Okay. Oh, right.
I've been teaching the last 2 years, and I was full-time there. So, yeah.
Okay, this is probably an older bio that like didn't have that in there.
In Fairfield University.
Yeah.
I've taught at too many schools to put in the bio, so, you know.
You've taught at the University of Bridgeport too.
And Fairfield U, and Queens College, and Gibbs, and the Art Institute. FIT is like the only college I haven't taught at.
Well, I'm glad we undid that fake news there.
Maybe you're going to teach there. Maybe we're collapsing the future and the past into the present. And that's what Terry is tapping into. She's channeling the future.
Yeah.
I have some tarot cards up there. Maybe I'm like becoming magical.
Look.
I don't know.
Look.
Oh, nice.
Fit.
There you go.
FIT. It's in the Rezo printing.
This is getting spooky. I'm going to have to clear my house after this. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm touching on some of the things you make that I've seen and know of, and let me know if there's anything I'm leaving out that is pivotal. So quilts, pillows, bags, some beautiful bags, like totes and like small coin.
Decorative pillows.
Decorative pillows. Good point. Yes, not just your average pillow. Scarves, beautiful hand-dyed scarves. So am I leaving anything out that is
Small
something-
leather goods.
Small leather goods.
And mice.
And what?
Mice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
If you say-
the toys. They're leather, right? Little leather.
If you say pillowcase, people think I make sheets. And if, small leather
Yes.
goods just encompasses bags and all of it. So.
Yes, I actually have one of your pillows right here.
Oh, you have one of those ones. That's really cool.
Yeah, from the
Nice.
Franklin Streetworks thing.
Yeah.
I'm sitting on it. I'm sorry. It doesn't mean I don't love it any more than.
They're meant to be used.
But it's beautiful, and my cat lies on it, and she totally blends. It's like amazing. Just like she disappears.
That's cool.
Great. So yeah, decorative pillows. So Emily, I'm going in alphabetical order, by the way. This is your biography is sort of like the one on your website, anyways. Like a little less nuts and bolts and a little more. I mean, it's a little more philosophy, but it has like some things you've done. So you've been publishing, and I love this, as a socially engaged practice since 1993, when you were a teenager. Yeah, I know. We weren't teenagers then. You have, and I love the diagram you sent me that had the tree, and it was sort of like these different levels of work. So you have you co-founded the Impractical Labor and Service of Speculative Arts Union for reflective creative practice, speculative. Wait, am I saying that? Service for speculative, reflective, creative practice.
Sorry,
This is the problem.
I know.
This is the problem.
It's a very good attempt. It's really challenging. It actually reminds me when I was teaching in China, we had to give these lectures for like this conference, and our translators had to translate Impractical Labor in Service of the Speculative Arts into Chinese, and they argued about it for about an hour about like how to translate it, because they're like, what do you mean by speculative? What do you mean? You know what I mean? Like each word they had us redefine, and I'm like, you know what? It's no easier for somebody in English. They also struggle.
Especially when I wrote Arts Union kind of under it in the wrong place, so it looks like it's like
we do just call it Impractical Labor for short, or ILSA. But yes, you are right. It is a union for reflective creative practice. That is what it is.
Great. Yeah. And then Alder, is it Alder or Alder?
Mm-hmm. Alder.
And Frankia, which is sort of your moniker or brand or stamp for new collaborations and then reissues of feminist archival material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The things that, and you got your MFA at Yale, just up the road here, and things I know that you make are posters and books and zines and a variety of publications, and then also like social practice. I feel like with this group, I have a question about the social in your work and collaboration and community, but of the three of you, you're sort of have had it that I've seen more sort of overtly social practice work, like your Pleasure Beach Lives, where you had people come do tours and like explore different plant life and that kind of thing. Did I leave anything? You're a teacher. We'll get into all the teach. You all teach. So you're at UConn stores right now, right? Mm-hmm. And before that, you were at UB, and you were the head of the department?
I was chair of graphic design there for 10 years.
Right. Okay.
But now I'm just a normal assistant professor.
Powerless. Is it fun?
Yes. So fun. So much fun.
Less administration, more just direct.
Yes, more just fun. Yeah.
Denyse, who I know the best and got the least written down for her bio. I'm so sorry.
Dang it.
I got injured and ran out of time. So you received your BFA at RISD, and you have a background in dance and movement and graphic. You studied graphic design. So you and Emily have that.
Yeah.
And I know, Richard, you have a design background too, but not graphic design, right? Per se.
Textiles.
Yeah. You raised in Massachusetts, and both of your parents were makers to some degree. I mean, they were professors, or not professors. They were teachers. One was an engineer, and they had multiple degrees. That's what I'm remembering. They both had like multiple degrees. Yes. Sorry. They went to school. They didn't teach it. Yeah.
I like imagining that you didn't look up anything and you're just like tossing things out and then you like see our reaction and then you're like, oh no, that's not what I meant. I meant that.
No, I just have terrible time management during COVID and did not get enough done. But I read, and now I'm going off memory instead of what I wrote down with Denyse.
Hey, it's just a bonus. I thought we were going to be live at 6, so the fact that we're not live is pretty amazing.
This is all part of my charm, is that I act like, like a Muppet, and then everyone feels comfortable, and
Totally. I was before, I was a little on edge. Not anymore.
Are we going live, Terry?
Are we?
No, it's not live.
It's me broadcast
we're
later.
recording it, and then we're gonna post it. Like
so much easier.
Yeah. So because I wanted this to
great.
Feel like comfortable, So plus you have to promote it to like a lot of people.
Does that mean you're gonna edit it?
I'm not gonna heavily edit it. I don't think. I mean, unless I'll run it by everybody. Like we might edit this part about whether we're gonna edit it or not out. I don't know. Or maybe not. I don't know. But I can do some minor editing, yes. And your primary, you have 2 primary modes of operation, which are making quilts and fabric design. And you also have written books. So you wrote Modern Quilts, Traditional Inspiration.
Yeah. Quilt instructional books.
Quilt instructional books.
Yeah. Patterns.
Yeah. So you have a huge following. And one of the things I loved about, I feel like everyone here has sort of thinks about art, craft, like art, design, and life as all being very interwoven. Like I feel like on the scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the least siloed and 1 being the most siloed of like that kind of thing, you all are between 8 and 10. And and I'm also thinking about Emily's chart she sent me, which was really interesting, where I'm just talking about your boxes right now, just the boxes, not the sub things, but thinking about understanding the world, these components, meditating, making, working, collecting and curating, and then moving through it. And I feel like all 3 of you have some elements of Denyse, your gardening is a big part, and nature are very much an influence on your practice. Richard, I'm a little less, what are your outside of your work things that like most directly connect to your creative practice?
Thrift store shopping. Gardening, because I grow a lot of the stuff that I dye with.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of connects with the collecting and curating and Denyse's gardening and
because my practice is primarily using repurposed clothing, that's why the thrift store shopping directly plays into my design process.
Yeah, and so all of you do some sort of repurposing in some way. So either histories, like the feminist zines, Denyse.
My fabric is like a reinterpretation of document, mostly 1930s, like feed sack era document fabrics.
Yeah. So
I collect those at the flea market.
So let's talk about. So I have a quote from Denyse about patterns. I'm gonna be like Brene Brown. I'm like, can I quote you to you? I listened to her podcast. Anyway, so Denyse said patterns. She's talking about patterns that evoke another time and feel fresh and current. And I see that in all of your work. So there's this other time, there's some, but then you add this incredibly like smart contemporary spin, right? So do you want to talk to me about like what how that operates? What is in your practice when you like what are there like certain steps? Is it intuitive? Is it improvisational? And if so, like how are you connecting more contemporary practices with the historic to kind of not, you all managed to not be nostalgic somehow or saccharine, and you all managed to actually bring forward contemporary practices while still looking back. So any thoughts on that?
I would say one part is that it's inherent to the process. I'd say for all three of us. I guess I should probably just speak for myself, but I'm seeing the overlaps too. Like, so in terms of, say, with letterpress, I'm like pointing to the background. Like the I know you brought up the using of the archive material, but just the process of using handset type and then designing that way and then redistributing it and then reusing it for something else. That inherent to that process is also like a collecting and organizing, like a scavenging over the years of like collecting like a library material to work with, which is, very similar to the way Richard works. Wait, now I think I forgot the question.
So with the scavenging of material, let's start there. So you have this collection of material. How do you relate to that? Are you in your studio working on one project and you notice something sitting on a shelf or do you and think, oh, I forgot about that, I want to do this with it, or it relates to what I'm doing right now, I'm going to add it? Or is it more of a, I've got this for this thing and I'll get to this thing at some point?
I think for me, I have to collect all the things, and then when I have I am very like conceptually motivated. I'm not really like somebody who likes to play with things. I wish I did, because I think that would be really therapeutic, but it's more like I need a specific purpose, and then I start making decisions, and then having a collection of things controls my decision making, where it's like, well, that's the only typeface I have in that size, so it's got to be that one. And then it's just each of those decisions drives the other decision. So it's really like a set of restrictions that I find really helpful. But also, of course, an excuse to always add to the collection of like, oh, I'd repeat myself less if I had more things to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm putting together, I'm sorry to interrupt. When I'm putting together a fabric collection, I was just thinking that I was going to say, I've amassed a lot of stuff, but it's not out and in my line of vision all the time. And I'm not always willing to go in and haul it all out. So sometimes what will spark the direction, usually I'm deadline driven. That's about the only way I get anything done. And it's how I make my living. So it's also based on like, oh, I need to do a new fabric collection for this licensing partner that I have. And so it might be something that comes into view like yesterday that will start the ball rolling. Usually, and I have to see everything. So at some point, even though I'm reluctant to make a big mess and pull everything out, at some point I will pull it all out. And Richard knows this because he's worked with me on fabric collections. I kind of have to see everything before. I'm an editor. So rather than, being able to say, oh, I need this, I might be able to say, oh, I need this or that, but it's usually that I have to just pull it all out eventually against my better judgment and pull it all out and be able to look at it all together and make decisions that way based on the visual.
So you have something in mind that is stored somewhere.
Well, it's more like, I'm more, I have that big collection and I'll eventually pull it out, but I feel like my impulses and the thing that sort of sparks my inspiration is usually something that'll float through my view, whether it's something that falls off the shelf that's been there for a while, or, you know, I drive by and I see something, or it's something that I've just picked up. That usually is the impetus for getting it going, rather than, you know, not hanging out in my storage area with all of it all the time.
Mm-hmm. So what's your relationship to like past and future, to like, I'm not gonna say present, because I feel like all of you are like future people. Like I think all of you work in a way that's moving the field forward as far as like design, right, and artistic practice. So what's your relationship, or how do you see the past and your aptitude and talent for moving the field, especially of quilting, I would say, forward?
Well, one thing I'm doing right now, and again, you know, because I'm self-supporting, a lot of these decisions are driven by, you know, the need for income. And, you know, I have a long history of licensing my fabric designs, which is not an ideal way to make a living. So because of advances in digital fabric printing over the last 5 years, especially, and it continues to just get better, what they're able to do, and less expensive. You know, so my most recent thing is drawing on all the archive of designs that I've already done that have a very short lifespan in the commercial realm. I'm revisiting those and combining them in different ways, and printing them on one piece of fabric, which is only possible printing it digitally. So I'm really interested in, and I hope that it can become an opportunity to do a lot more exploration too. So, you know, I still need to be mindful of delivering what I believe my followers or customers want, which is usable pieces of fabric, of cute prints, but combining it with other things like photography of ephemera, or, you know, I don't know yet. So I'm really interested in playing with that and hopefully expanding that over time.
Yeah, I think you showed me a couple of those a while back, and we were looking at different patterns on them, and it was really exciting. It kind of, yeah, it's like a little bit more like collage. It kind of made me think of like someone like, you know, like Robert Rauschenberg or something, that's kind of like combining of unlike things in a way that's makes it its own new thing, you know, which,
yeah. And it's also exciting because it's a product and you know, that I can make myself. I can design it and manufacture it and sell it and ship it relatively easily, because it is one thing, even though it's delivering like the traditional whole collection of fabrics, but also it's a new thing because it's one panel, and you could use it in different ways than a quilter normally would. So
hopefully it would encourage innovation among the people who are inspired by you.
Yeah, they can hope. Yeah, and I'll help them figure that out too. By one thing I'd like to do is invite different quilters or artists to use the panel in some way, and then document that and show people, like, here's another thing you can do with this.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Richard? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, so Denyse and Emily have really helped me clarify something about sort of my own studio space and my practice. So Emily mentioned, you have a typeface or that maybe is a size that is only applicable to a certain use, and the way that that may speak to what it wants to be. Denyse mentioned having everything away, and then, we pull it all out when a collection needs to happen. I have to see everything, and I don't see everything at all times, but I usually know where everything is, but I sort of bury things, and it's problematic. So particularly my leathers and my tweeds are all stacked in such a way that I can see them all at once, because that oftentimes directs me to what they want to be. It also helps me with the shopping. So like today specifically, I know that I need ivory leather. I have used a lot of my stash up, and I was really lucky. I only use leather that's repurposed. And so that includes industrial scrap leather, like maybe leftover from shoes or handbag production. That includes old apparel that maybe no one should have been wearing in the first place. And then specifically, it also includes a lot of upholstery scraps. So today in the fabric store I was in, they happen to have a box of upholstery scrap leather, which, you know, they're little tiny pieces to start with. And because a lot of what I do is about collecting 12 different shades of ivory and then throwing them all in a bin, which is a technique that I'm borrowing from Denyse, by the way. So having all of these leathers thrown in together, and it makes me think about, I'm able to do something that, it's not that Louis Vuitton or Gucci couldn't do that, but would they go to the trouble of dyeing 20 different leathers to end up making this bag? Maybe. Whereas my process is inherently getting the 20 different shades because of the recycling part.
Which makes it more affordable too, for in a way, right?
No, totally. No, don't even go there.
I mean, for the customer, not for you.
No, because this is something that I've battled against from the very beginning, Terry. Like, everyone always giggles when they see my business card because it says repurposed, organic, and really good looking. And specifically, I started using that, thinking about the fact that people's perception of recycled design is that it's inherently going to somehow look less, you know, and a lot of places it does. Like, recycled paper never gets better, it always gets less. You know, newsprint is not as nice as brand new white paper. Recycled glass is never as clear as new glass. But in recycling, the fabrics that I'm recycling, I'm able to cut around flaws and trouble, but that process of recycling, the labor costs are way higher than using new materials. It's trouble.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Huh. I read, yeah, because I just was like, oh, you found it. You don't have to dye them all, but yeah, but there's the labor of finding them and collecting them.
Right, and then the labor of chopping things up that aren't the right size. You know, when you have a big, huge expanse of something, it's a lot easier to chop it to be the size you need. But if I'm trying to make an 18-inch tote bag and the leather is only 12, there's a problem there. So that oftentimes drives me towards creative solutions. Like, it means that the bag is going to be striped instead of being solid because the pieces I have are smaller.
But even the shirts that you collect for your quilts, you know, there's all this beautiful men's shirting fabric, but it's a shirt first. So you have to cut all the buttons off and the collars and the cuffs, and you're very meticulous about, you know, saving all the buttons and all the bits and pieces, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt.
It's like processing, I was gonna say like processing an animal.
I was gonna say, yeah, he's a butcher. The vegetarian
butcher of inanimate objects. A butcher of inanimate objects.
Sorry, Richard, you're not a butcher. You're not.
I also like to think
clothing.
that I'm like
say that.
saving garments that are no longer wearable. You know, the sweaters with holes, the shirts with stains, the leather that's torn. You know.
Yeah, you're a rescue service more than a butcher.
And Terry, I've thought a lot about the scalability part of this. You know, Emily's practice is so outward facing, and I take so much inspiration through that. And I've always dreamed of this idea of, and you know, Denyse and I have talked about this a lot, but like, what is a cottage community and how would I engage further with people in Bridgeport? You know, if my job, if my process were to grow and I would be selling more, I would like to be able to employ local people rather than sending everything to India or Mexico or someone else. That's a dream.
That's great. Yeah. So that's how sort of a social imperative or social practice aspect you could see that entering your work more.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certainly the people that want the jobs. The problem is, you know, to scale it. So I know that a former coworker of mine runs a program where she teaches former felons how to sew. The problem is, where do they then work in the state of Connecticut? Because we don't really have the manufacturing like we used to.
Yeah. Well, speaking of place, that was another question I have. So how does, obviously wherever thrift shops are available to you seems to be important to everyone here. But how does place, or does place, like, influence your work? And if so, how?
Well, for me, being in the we're all have spaces in the American Fabrics building, which up until the 70s, I think, was producing lace trims. So from, turn of the century, 1950, I don't know, when did they start? 1907, 1915?
1911, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that. And so to be in a building that has a textile past I really like that aspect of where we are physically. That's all I have to say.
But like, even like more large, like being in Bridgeport or being in, does that like have any influence on your?
I've always, I grew up in central Massachusetts, which is a place kind of like Bridgeport. I grew up near Worcester, which is an old manufacturing city. And so the landscape of Bridgeport, was very familiar to me. Lots of old red brick buildings that once made something, and the kind of worker housing nearby. And, in Massachusetts too, a lot of those buildings were empty for many years or not really getting utilized. And in some places that's changing. And same thing in Bridgeport. It's a struggle. And I've seen that happen in Bridgeport. It's an expensive undertaking to clean up some of these places, and cities don't often want to preserve or honor that history, which I think is unfortunate because, for any city to kind of revitalize and have jobs, I think it really needs to come from the inside out. And small manufacturing businesses would be perfect for Bridgeport because we have these buildings that could be retrofitted. It's the right kind of landscape. It's easy access to New York and other places because we're on the train line and right on the highway. But the powers that be in the city don't always, for some reason, they look at those big companies that are headquartered elsewhere, to come in and have retail or something like that. And I don't always think that that's the right answer, but.
So sort of working, the sort of like working class, like the housing that was made for workers who work in the factories, and that is something that connects with your sort of value system of labor. And
Richard, for instance, lives in one of those, there's several developments around Bridgeport that were built at the turn of the century when the factories were being built, and they were modeled after, and Richard can talk about it better, but they're really well designed, small, efficient. Everybody has a little bit of outdoor space. They're all unique, so it's not like cookie cutter houses. And most importantly, well built and well designed, so it's a nice way to live. And I think that's really critical, to invest in your workforce in that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people do that so much these days.
Yeah, you don't see Walmart building quality worker housing, right? It's like on a bus line or a tram line, I guess, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Terry,
me-
sorry.
Oh, you go.
I have a way to tie it all together, and I'll throw it back at you, Emily. So, you know, Denyse introduced me to Bridgeport. I moved here to work for her. And I ended up seeing the neighborhood that I live in, which is Seaside Village, which was built as World War I factory worker munitions housing. You know, I ended up buying in this neighborhood, having seen it while Denyse was house hunting. So I think the affordable aspect of Bridgeport was huge. And of course, when I moved here, having been in Providence, I was thinking about the art community that was there and hoping to find it here. And of course, I never felt like I found it, but of course, I think we collectively have, to a large degree, created it. And the American Fabrics building, the quality of artists there, you know, I think it's pretty great. Everyone's really dedicated to their craft. So here's an example of like the way that thrifting and secondhand and history sort of all become circular. So I know that Emily and Chris spend a lot of time at the flea market. Denyse introduced me to the flea market. I'm thrifting all the time. Emily's husband, Chris, at the flea market found this very old magazine from, this one's fall 1952. And there were these outrageously expensive magazines that documented fabrics for the industry, not really for the home woman.
Wow.
And this particular issue has this whole focus on lace. So a number of the laces, these are actual fabrics on here.
Oh, wow.
They're not photographs, they're actual swatches. And a number of them are from the American Fabrics building. And then, you know, here is the actual advertisement. There we go.
Oh my God.
For the American Fabrics building.
Nice.
Oh.
I probably have that letterpress
What year?
block with the lace picture because I have all those.
Actual lace though, Emily. It's not, again, it's
Oh,
not
that
a
piece
letter.
is actual lace
It's an actual
also?
piece of lace.
Never
right.
mind.
What year is that publication, Richard?
52.
Oh.
So Chris saw this and bought it as a thank you because I fixed a tote bag of his because I have an industrial sewing machine. You know, now I have this. Emily has letterpress blocks based on the lace and has done letterpress using her, and she keeps throwing her hand over her shoulder and we don't know what's behind her. So Emily, I want you to explain that. But Denyse as well, you know, has a number of the swatches. Well, it's behind the Rizo, Emily.
I know.
Nice.
But Denyse has actually taken inspiration from some of the actual lace. You know, in the last 15 years working with Denyse, we've tried to create quilting patterns using the lace. So I think all of us have taken a lot of direct inspiration from the building.
That's amazing.
One thing actually I do want to add is, so I'm the only one who's actually from Connecticut here. I'm from Connecticut. I did both my undergrad and my graduate in Connecticut. I'm stating it like I'm surprised, but I already knew that as a fact, but it's more just like I'm just stating it.
Thank you for stating.
Yeah. Of course, my whole life growing up, I always just wanted to escape it. Like I never imagined I would still be here, you know, out of my own volition. And in fact, now be really glad that I'm here. I think for me, one thing I think about the longer I'm here is the opportunity of not moving around allows you to dig deeper. And so like a lot of my work with archives it's really comes from being in Connecticut. So like the book I made with Bloodroot, like I first went to Bloodroot when I was 16. And sometimes I kind of worked on that book for like 7 years in terms of I had an idea for a book, but then it wasn't the right idea. And sometimes these things just take a really long time. And so the fact
Emily,
that I've been
what's the
somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes, the feminist vegetarian restaurant here in Bridgeport. It's been here since 1977.
On a dead-end street in a residential neighborhood.
That's right.
It was the first
away.
restaurant that Denyse took me to when I visited the state.
Aw, see?
And my dog and their orange cat are reincarnated friends or enemies. I can't figure it out yet, but there's a thing here.
A deep bond. And from their archives, like that's led to future projects. And in fact, like the project I have right now in New Haven is connected to Bloodroot also, you know, so it's just like being able to be in one place. I guess it also reminds me of that expression, bloom where you're planted, right? Where it's just like, here you are. And like, what are the resources and what's interesting about where you are? Because I think that is true anywhere, you know, but I feel fortunate that I've been able to find so many like-minded people here. Because definitely didn't feel that way growing up.
Yeah, I have a kinship with what you're saying. I mean, I've been here now 11 years, and I basically feel like I have two homes, which is Nashville and here. So I grew up in Nashville, but like, yeah, I feel like I finally am digging deeper here, and there's some really cool stuff. Like, I want to build bat houses in Black Rock. I'm like, why don't we have bat houses? There's an estuary. There's mosquitoes. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's do a big, you know, so stuff like that where you like get to know a community long enough, and you like start to get ideas of ways to connect and do things.
I'll help, Walt.
But Denyse?
I'll help.
Okay. Apparently, you have to do really tall poles because they have to fly down before they fly up. We need to find an engineer to help us with it. So I'm not going to get into like the craft/art rabbit hole too much, but I do want to just, since you all three have a mix. I mean, you use craft. I consider you all artists. Not that the craft people are not artists too, but like you're thinking about art and you're thinking about craft and you're thinking about design and you're thinking about social, you know, connection. And so Richard sent me a review or an interview from 10 years ago, approximately 10 years ago, where he said, it's like the word craft, and I think this has changed too, so this is why I want to kind of talk about it, but it's like the word craft has become pejorative and naughty, which makes me love it more. So first of all, I love the word naughty. I'm kind of curious how everyone considers their practices to be naughty in some way. Or mischievous, we could use that word. But Richard also mentioned that interview about legibility, like the idea of like when you have a label, you're more legible or perhaps more invisible, depending on the label, right? Like it can go either way. But I had a friend who was, he's a very good songwriter in Austin, and he had a meeting with a producer type person, and the person said, you know, I can promote a fork and I can promote a spoon, but I can't promote a spork. And it's because there's this like, do you remember sporks? Taco Bell had them. Yeah. So for the young people, a spork is a spoon that has like a little jagged edge. And it didn't last that long. Anyway.
They're big with campers, I think.
Oh, the campers? Oh, okay. But they used to have like plastic sporks at Taco Bell. That's the only place I ever saw a spork.
Terry, the timing of that interview and when I said that, I was thinking about that a lot because that's about exactly when the Museum of Arts and Crafts changed its name to the Museum of Art and Design, which really pissed me off because they had an opportunity to own the word craft and make it important. And instead, now they're the Mad Museum, which they somehow think is a cute name. And I still lament that they did that.
Yeah. And I remember, you know, I'm gonna be really transparent. When I was younger and a young curator, like 24 or whatever, 25, I poo-pooed craft. I did. We had a glass show from Pilchuck, and I was just like, why are we doing a glass show? This is so dumb. And my mentor, who was very kind and firm, looked at me and she just finally was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, okay, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, because I trusted her. And it was a beautiful show, and there was like amazing objects and ceramics. I'm just become a ginormous fan of artists like Trisha Baga, and of course they're more historic artists. I can't remember the guy's name. Last name starts with an A. Who like took ceramics into art galleries in a way that people hadn't before. And but I am interested in this idea of legibility to people outside of the art, the more nuanced art scene, who actually like think about these things more deeply and are contemplating like these these things. So I feel like we've come a long way, maybe, in a way, but then how are we feeling about legibility of these kind of hybrid, I mean, hybrid's kind of an oversimplification, but these kind of multifaceted practices? I mean, you see people like Colleen Smith having banners that are textile pieces at the Whitney Biennial, people like Tamika Norris, Diedrich Bracken's New Museum. So there's different, you know, you're seeing, so I'm seeing, there's someone, I forgot their name, but people are posting on Instagram all the time right now. There's another textile artist who has beautiful work that has figurative stuff going on. Denyse, you were showing stuff about, I think, a quilt show at the
yeah, Bisa Butler.
Yeah, so this is, it seems like it's a, you know,
so to me,
breath of air into like this mix, right, of
I still think there's a really strong divide though between, and you know, maybe necessarily so. The RISD Museum, the Rhode Island School of Design Museum, has a big collection of decorative arts. And that's what I do, I guess. You know, I'm a decorative artist. That's the category that I fall into because it's functional. It's made to be beautiful and to serve a function. And I think the difference between, you know, the art world, especially the contemporary art world, is about something else. And there are a lot of artists who are referencing craft in their work. Basil Kincaid, is that his name? There's another, you know who I'm talking about, Richard. Anyway, there's a bunch of artists who I'm aware of who are using quilts in their work in some form or other, but they are still firmly in the art world. They're being shown in galleries. It's being talked about in a curatorial sense, like with and decorative art gets a different approach. And for a long time, I wanted to be taken, you know, wanted to be taken seriously as an artist, but I'm perfectly happy being a decorative artist now. And making, you know, I'm a designer and a maker of functional objects. And it's just a different.
I would want to push back a little there though, because I think about a lot of things that contemporary artists think about. Like, you think about how to push the medium, you think about art history, design history, like.
Sure, but I think, you know, any potter, or, you know, they have a wealth of knowledge of not just technique, but, you know, the history of the material, and yet they're not necessarily they might be making objects that you use every day, glassware or ceramics, as opposed to something that's going to be in a museum, or, you know, that is, I don't know. I think there's just still a difference and there might be overlap in the way that I work and the way that I think about my work and the materials that I use and what informs it, but
so that's what I'm talking about, the legibility, because I think that those subtle infusions on, you know, aren't necessarily noticed because there's just sort of a shutting down or not seeing from, you know, some curators or whatever, because they just aren't honestly thinking creatively about like how, you know, how you relate to a minimalist sculptor.
Right.
Anybody else? Sorry. Do y'all have thoughts about this legibility of some, Emily, with you, I know, with you, you don't quilt, but like you are using graphic design.
Well, I was thinking of the parallel of what Denyse was saying for me is, my work goes to libraries, not museums. So when a museum acquires my work, it goes to the museum library, right? It doesn't ever go really to the museum. I think maybe very few exceptions. But that doesn't bother me at all. Like, that's what I love about making books or about publishing, is that it can exist in all these places. Like, I send it out through the mail myself. It's entirely something that I distribute, but then one of the places it ends up is at an institution. So of course, that's because I don't have to rely on it for an income. If I did, that would be real trouble. But because I teach for a living, like it opens more room for how the work can be in the world. And so like that to me is really important, that it can just be part of people's daily life. And that, if some people don't, some of the things I make, people might not realize how thoroughly handmade it is, or that like I actually folded all the paper. But again, that doesn't bother me. Like, I think people who are sensitive to those things kind of like pick up on it, or it's just kind of like ends up being in the object somehow. And so I guess the way I think about craft, or the fact that I make all these things by hand, I mean, so much of it is out of habit now, like, because I started as a teenager just like making zines and like folding them, stapling them. And that's still just the way I like to work. I don't like to outsource things. Like, I want to be able to make it myself. So I think of it, craft as both a means and an end, because the means part of it is like the actual enjoyment of those processes, of just feeling like connected to your body and connected to the materials, and, just like having a different experience, and just like basically everything you make, having that intimate connection that you actually made it, somebody else didn't make it, like you made it. So I often think my work probably is illegible to most people, but like that's okay with me. I just accepted it.
Emily, I have a question for you though, because, I'm thinking about like intention of the artist. Like Bisa Butler tends to fall into the fine art world because the intention is that it would be there. And also content. She's doing portraits of family and famous African Americans. So it's not intended to be on a bed. So that makes it pretty clear. But Emily, your work is printed in multiples, and often when it is for sale is relatively affordable, but you often exhibit it in museums and galleries. And your work often transforms when it's exhibited as such. I'm thinking of the piece you have right now that's up at Art Space in New Haven. So can you talk about like, what is the thought process of how to display multiples of maybe a pamphlet in a way that has more of a fine art feeling?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Richard. I feel like it's something I'm just beginning to figure out. So for, in Practical Labor, we've been producing shows, a lot of paper for years now, I guess going to like 2012. But then basically we're displaying the contributions of so many different people. Like, we send something out as a call and response, they send it back, and then we figure out how to display it. My more recent challenge is reproducing like this feminist ephemera, or like these, reproducing this feminist ephemera, and then figuring out, okay, like what is the version that somebody can just buy and read, and that's like an affordable version, and then how do I install this in the gallery such that you walk in and you can have a moment of being like, wow, like what is this? Because for a long time, everything I've always made is very small, and there's definitely no like wow factor. And so it's definitely something I'm trying to figure out. I'm pretty excited about the Art Space show because I feel like a lot of it is scale, and the fact that I was able finally to achieve a bigger scale, and that the individual units then made up a larger composition as opposed to just a lot of one thing, that was a lot of one thing, like a lot of a variety of things that made a pattern, that made a visual, that then if you spent more time with, you realize, oh wow, I could actually read this stuff without getting overwhelmed, because it's not like a ton of different stuff. It's actually stuff that's repeating, but it's not just so repetitive that it's just kind of like, just read one, so it still feels like there's some discovery. But it's definitely been a process I'm still working on. Basically, it comes out of like a disappointment of like earlier this year when I had an opportunity to try to figure out a gallery install of a piece. And I was just like, yeah, that's not working, like that not going to do that again. So
I need to visit
process.
the Art Space show. When is it open till, Emily?
Oh, Richard, you're so sweet. It is open until December 12th. Art Space is open Wednesday to Saturday, 12 to 6.
Excellent. Do you have to make an appointment?
You don't. Yeah, even though it's phase 2, it's pretty chill over there. You can just show up.
Do I have to pay to get in?
It is free.
That's free. Let's just, for a brief moment, let's talk about, Emily, I didn't have this as a question, but you talking about thinking about how to show your work in certain circumstances in a gallery setting. What are your experiences with curators as far as people who can help you? Does anybody have positive, or just like, or is there a lack of that kind of exchange? Like, what are your thinking? How do curators have curators, or have they not helped you think about that through those things? Because that's something curators should be able to help people think through. Is all I'm saying. So.
Well, Terri, you did an amazing job with my show at UB. I forget how many years ago that was, because and I don't know what it would have been like if you hadn't helped out with it, like to bring, you talked about the people who use my patterns to make some of the same quilts that we showed, and kind of the whole process in such a beautiful way that was interesting for me to think about. Like I don't always, in the midst of the way that I normally work, I don't always think about, have the time for reflection on sort of the bigger arc of all the people who are touched and how they absorb it and take it in, and then give something back of their, like using what I make to make their own thing.
Right, that kind of open circuit thing.
Yeah, even that phrase. I don't apply that kind of language normally to my own work process, so that was really gratifying.
Thanks. That was not me baiting someone to say something nice about me. It really looked that way.
That's about my only experience.
Richard and Emily, do you have experiences with, or even collaboration with other artists in a show, or like anything where it's sort of like you're thinking about how to exhibit your work with someone else, whether it be a curator or other artists in the same show? Or
I mean, I do want to briefly pull this back to the original comment you made about legibility and craft versus art and all of that. I mean, Denyse and I talk about this a lot. I thought the show that you curated that she did at UB was interesting because there was one quilt that was on a bed. And a question that we get all the time as quilters is, well, is it for the wall or is it for my bed? And neither of us define that. It's really on the client. And I would say that I think for both of us, most of our clients do end up putting the quilts on their bed. I have one piece that recently sold at Open Studios that ended up with a collector couple in New Haven, and I know they wanted to put it on the wall. But it's interesting with quilts specifically, if we think of them as being designed with the intention of being high craft, somehow this is the legibility part, is that I don't feel like the consumer necessarily understands, and I don't necessarily know that curators are helping. And so Denyse had that experience when I was still working with her, that she had a number of quilts that were exhibited at the Pucci showroom in New York, which is sort of the pinnacle of high design. And people don't blink when they see a coffee table or an armoire or a sofa that, oh, this is high design, and I'm going to buy it for my home, and it will accumulate value, and it will be this piece that is both functional, but I sort of think of it in an art context. And somehow, and people do that in a second with rugs. It's museums exhibit rugs as art. People know that rugs inherently carry family histories in this. That somehow, like, there's something about quilts that people have a hard time with it. And I don't know if that's on curators or if that's on designers. It entirely could be. Yeah, I mean, even rugs traditionally were made by
men, right?
Men when they weren't made by children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like kind of like women's labor. So that's a feminist thing a little bit there, right?
And to some extent, African-American women are getting a lot of the fame now, at least, antique pieces, not necessarily contemporary pieces all the time. But I think those are being
I
seen
was
more.
frustrated when the Gee's Bend quilts were exhibited at the Whitney Museum. I was personally frustrated with the wall text because it had no relationship in my mind. You know, they talked about highfalutin, you know, reasons, you know, like they were attributing all these kind of high art ways of thinking to the quilts that, you know, I knew a lot of them looked the way they looked because of the process of how they were made. You know, the tools that were used, the space that they might have been making it on or lack of, you know, and that's as valid as, and, you know, it doesn't have to become this,
Right. They were overlaying it with like conceptual art, like thinking.
and I think that's a problem, probably, because it's like saying it's not enough on its own as a beautiful object and made in a humble way. Like somehow they have to lay on this other stuff, and I just find that really frustrating.
It's like a form of rationalization because they're like, oh, if it's a museum, we have to attach museum meaning to it, or people aren't going to understand why, or we can't rationalize to ourselves like why it's in the museum.
I think it also devalues sort of the sense of community. You know, like so much about Gee's Bend was about sort of decades and decades of mother passing on to daughter, grandmother passing on to daughter, you know, all of these skills. And the idea of, you know, none of us are necessarily inherently great with color. I think, you know, they were dealt a certain amount of fabric that they had, and they found a way to turn it into something beautiful. Not everyone can do that. And so,
yeah,
they deserved more credit, I think, than was given in the nature of the text on the walls.
Well, speaking of intergenerational teaching, so I know Denyse and Richard, both of you had family members who sewed, and that kind of got you started. Emily, did your family, how does did your practice come at all out of your childhood growing up, or how, you know?
Definitely, yeah, no, definitely childhood growing up. I've just always loved books, and I was definitely read to a lot when I was a kid. And a lot of my earliest memories are being read to, like the Swiss Family Robinson with me and my sister on my bed, on my mom's bed, and her reading us to that. And I think just like the basic philosophy of that, like the DIY philosophy of that book, which is a super weird book, by the way, if you revisit it, it's like this really like super Christian book that I had no idea, I didn't notice that at all when I was a kid. I was just like, ooh, we're going to build a house. We're going to make a boat. Like, you know, and I started like writing stories and drawing at a young age and making them into books. So, but my parents don't have a history of bookmaking. They are creative people. They have beautiful gardens, and my mom is a quilter and a knitter. But yeah, not specifically publishing or bookmaking.
So it came from something a lot of us did, was have books read to us.
Yeah. And just like really loving, like there's a really loving the form of the book. Like I remember there's this picture, I don't remember it. It's just that there's a picture of me when I'm maybe like 2, and my dad brought home this book that he got free from the office. Like, you know, those little address books that like they send and be like, we can make you like 50 of these and you can give them to clients or whatever. So he just brought it home and gave it to me, and I was just like carrying it around. So there's like picture of me just like holding this little book because it's like my book, and I'm just so excited. And like that's basically how I still feel. My book.
I love that story so much. All right, so I'm stealing this from Brene Brown's podcast. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. It's a COVID thing.
Definitely.
Walk and listen. Okay, so I'm going to do like a rapid fire thing to end this with, unless anybody has something really pressing they need to say. Okay, so of the materials you work in, and I know this is like a tough question, what's your favorite material to work in? Like physical material. Today, this week. It doesn't have to be awesome.
It's more just for me, it's just like paper. It's just boring. So I feel like somebody else does have a better question, a better answer.
Paper. Okay.
Paper?
Yeah.
I have a craving
It
for
could be other things.
yarn lately.
Yarn? Okay.
Yeah.
This week has been a lot about wool fabric for me, so I'll go with that. I love wool. Go wool.
Go wool. Do you know about Rosemary
Man and wool.
Trockel's wool paintings? Machine wool. She did these in the 80s. Rosemary Trockel, she did these giant machine-made wool pieces that
I'll look them
were
up.
called knit paintings, I think, or something like
Okay.
that. Yeah. Okay. Right now, not forever, but like who is your favorite artist, maker, or thinker that you're really jiving on right now?
Let's be rapid fire.
Right.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Or just like who pops to mind when I say genius, or not genius, because it's like a patriarchal word. Amazing maker, thinker.
I have really been enjoying the work of Tamara Shopson, which is just so, she's a designer and illustrator and also author. So she's been, and her parents own Shopsons. They're both passed, but it was like a famous New York deli, like restaurant deli. But anyway, I really enjoyed her books and just like her creativity and her ideas. She's also married to Jason Fulford, who also I think is just really creative and has really interesting ideas, and they make great work. So I find them pretty inspiring.
Great.
I'm looking right now a lot at early and actually just 1980s Issey Miyake. He's a fashion designer. He's famous for his pleated pieces, but what I'm actually interested in looking at is where he was just sort of, as a designer, exploring material. So things like needle felting of wool, taking common fabrics, but like coating them in foil to transform them into something else. So the way in which he's known for transforming fabric, I think that's why I'm looking at him right now.
Cool. I mean, Denyse, you got your cats are like have their own Instagram.
Cats are my, total inspiration. Yeah, and just, my mind goes blank when I get asked these questions, so sorry.
It's only because somebody asked me a day ago. So I already, yeah.
Denyse, do you still think about Agnes Martin? I know you have a lot of her books.
I found a book that you gave me a few years ago, and I pulled it from the shelf. I don't think I ever read it back then. And this is, I never read anymore. This is a problem. But it was a conversation with Agnes Martin, like another artist. Do you remember that book that you? Mm-hmm. But I haven't thought about her actually in a while. Mostly the one thing that I still look at is World of Interiors. It's a shelter magazine, a British home magazine, and I like it because it has everything from castles to trailers. and I like that it doesn't, one is not better than another, and it, there might be an interior where cat has completely torn up all the upholstery, or it's cluttered to the gills with stuff. And unlike American shelter magazines where everything sort of tends to look the same and it's all perfect and clean. Mm-hmm. So that, I find a lot of inspiration still in that, looking at that magazine.
Nice.
Yeah.
What TV show, I'm directly stealing this from Brene Brown. What TV show are you binge watching right now?
I'm always so embarrassed by my TV tastes because they're so specific. I have been obsessively watching anything horror or sci-fi because for me, that is I need to have my, my disbelief suspended. So I've been watching this.
Yeah.
I've been watching watching this sci-fi show from a few years back that's called Channel Zero that is somewhere between sci-fi and horror.
Nice.
Cool.
Is it on Netflix or what's it on?
I'm watching it on Shudder, which is the horror-specific streaming service. I should say the interesting thing about the TV show is that it's based on the idea of creepypasta, which means that each season is its own story, and creepypasta is the idea that there are these stories that live in the public domain. So it's this guy who wrote these things based on this thing that like the public have these. So they're not from anything else. They're from like the kind of the people's heads.
Wait,
Pasta? Like
Creepypasta. So like
P-A-S-T-A?
Yeah, so the common example would be the Slender Man. So the Slender Man is probably the most famous example of this, where he's like this entirely internet-driven, it's not a children's book, it's not a TV show, it's not any of these things.
Okay.
And there was that famous murder a few years back where two 12-year-old girls tried to kill their friend because they thought it was related to Slender Man. So.
Oh, right.
Okay. So it's based on people absorbing sort of things through the internet and then doing.
Yeah, it's like memes that turn into stories, and then stories get written based on the memes. And.
Okay, like Pizzagate. But if someone did a move, like there's an artist who did a piece about Pizzagate, like a video piece about Pizzagate because it was different. Okay.
You can just look up creepypasta. It's a thing. It's one word.
Okay.
That's what I'm binge watching.
Okay.
I just watched the Queen's Gambit, stylish, kind of nerdy chess thing. And then I realized that the actress had also been in a Masterpiece Theater thing called The Miniaturist. And I had watched that, but I didn't know. She's a very interesting looking face. Her eyes are very wide set. So I rewatched The Miniaturist recently. Generally, I really like period stuff, costume dramas.
Yeah. I'm watching the Queen's Gambit right now. My sister, who did sets for like professional, like for Nashville and stuff, she's like, this is the best set dressing I've ever seen. Like it's so specific and smart, and
it's really well done and well acted. So that's good.
I really love Umbrella Academy because
what is that?
It's based on a Marvel thing, but it's essentially a show about a dysfunctional family. They just all happen to be superheroes. But I love the gay drug addicted guy who sees ghosts because he's hysterical. But it's a great show. I've already watched it, so I was like, whatever, I don't know what to watch next. But okay. What is your number one sanity strategy during COVID? This is the last question.
Well, in the beginning, I called people a lot and sent cards and letters and stuff, and then I fell off of that. And I feel like I need to do that again. I'm very stressed out about, even though I'm happy with the results of the election, I'm really worried about what's going to happen. So, and the pandemic is creeping up again. So I feel like I need to reach out, and because even though I'm feeling really stressed about it, and it always helps to check in on other people.
Right, like be in service a little bit.
Yeah.
Take going outside.
Exercise.
Maybe we should have an ice skating party this winter, if possible, because like we could do that all together.
Do you think things will actually freeze, or do you think?
I don't know.
Ice skating rink in Stamford now at Mill River.
Rinks might be a problem. I'm thinking more like some pond.
I said like outdoors, right? But I like this vision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always wanted to do it up at Huntington State Park because they have such a nice lake there. And there's little bridges that go over it, so you could skate underneath the bridges. I don't have.
I bet you're like
own
really
ice-
good at skating.
Huh?
It's like I said, I bet you're really good at skating. Like it's part of
I'm
your
not.
dance thing. You want to like do some like special flips and twirls and.
One of my favorite movie scenes ever is in The Bishop's Wife with Cary Grant. Has anybody ever seen that? Where
I'm not sure.
yeah, and Cary Grant's this amazing skater, but and when they go to this rink, and Loretta Young, is it Loretta Young that is the actress? Anyway, none of them can skate until they're skating with Cary Grant, and they're like, it's like my dream to step out on the ice and be on one foot and twirling around. But I do not skate that way.
Okay, we'll be the judge.
This is amazing. Thank you all for doing this, and I will be in touch soon. I'll send you a video to look at, and we'll make sure we all like it. We'll send it out to the world. All right, I love you all.
Thank you, Terry. This was great.
Terry. Thank you so much for asking us.
see
This
you
was
all.
fun.
Yeah,
It's nice
this
to
was
see
really
you
nice.
all.
All right.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.